Late last night, a brief exchange between two people became the kind of moment that now travels faster than context ever can. According to accounts circulating this morning, the conversation was simple, almost casual in tone, yet instantly charged with implication. She asked, "Do you want to stay here tonight?" The reply came back without a pause. "I'm not sleeping on the sofa." What might once have remained a private, forgettable line spoken behind closed doors has instead emerged as a talking point, shared, reposted, and dissected as if it were a developing story with broader cultural consequences. Those familiar with the situation describe the atmosphere as calm, not confrontational, and notably absent of raised voices or dramatic exits. Yet the weight of the response transformed the moment. The question, on its surface, sounded like an invitation. The answer, however, reframed it entirely, exposing an unspoken assumption that many say has become increasingly common in modern relationships. Within minutes of being shared online, interpretations began to multiply. Was it confidence? Was it defensiveness? Or was it simply honesty delivered without cushioning? By early morning, the exchange was being treated less like gossip and more like a reflection of changing interpersonal dynamics. Commentators noted that the response did not reject the idea of staying the night, but rather rejected the condition that often accompanies such offers. The sofa, long understood as a symbol of emotional limbo, surfaced again as shorthand for uncertainty, punishment, or half-inclusion. In this case, the refusal to accept it became the headline. Observers point out that invitations phrased as questions can sometimes function as tests, carrying expectations that are never clearly stated. In previous eras, social norms might have dictated quiet compliance or awkward acceptance. Today, however, there appears to be a growing resistance to ambiguity. The response, direct and unembellished, seemed to draw a boundary before confusion could take root. That clarity, for many readers, is what made the exchange resonate. As the quote circulated, reactions quickly polarized. Some applauded the statement as self-respecting and refreshingly transparent, praising it as an example of someone refusing to minimize their comfort or dignity. Others criticized the tone, suggesting it shut down vulnerability and replaced it with rigidity. Still, even critics acknowledged that the line struck a nerve because it mirrored situations they themselves had experienced but never verbalized so plainly. What is notable is how rapidly a personal moment transformed into a broader discussion. Relationship counselors, social commentators, and everyday users weighed in, each bringing their own interpretation. Some framed it as a rejection of outdated power dynamics, where one person controls the space and the other accepts inconvenience to maintain harmony. Others saw it as a warning sign of emotional walls going up too quickly. The diversity of opinions underscored just how layered the exchange was, despite its brevity. Sources indicate that there was no argument before the question was asked, no visible conflict that would traditionally lead to someone being relegated to the sofa. This detail has fueled speculation that the reply was less about the furniture itself and more about preemptively addressing an assumed outcome. In that sense, the answer functioned as a declaration, an insistence on equality rather than an ultimatum. Throughout the morning, the phrase began appearing in timelines alongside commentary about modern dating fatigue. Many users connected it to a broader sense of exhaustion with mixed signals and undefined expectations. In an era where communication is constant yet clarity often feels scarce, the bluntness of the response felt, to some, like a relief. It cut through politeness and went straight to the core issue. What does staying the night actually mean? Analysts observing the trend note that such moments gain traction not because they are extraordinary, but because they are familiar. Countless people have found themselves navigating similar situations, weighing whether to accept discomfort in order to avoid awkwardness. The difference here lies in the choice to verbalize the boundary immediately, rather than negotiating it silently or resenting it later. By midday, the exchange had been reframed as a symbol of shifting norms. Younger audiences, in particular, appeared more likely to support the response, viewing it as an assertion of self-worth. Older commentators were more divided, with some interpreting it as unnecessary bluntness in a situation that might have been resolved more gently. This generational split added another layer to the conversation, highlighting how expectations around politeness and honesty continue to evolve. Despite the varying reactions, one point remained consistent: the power of a single sentence to change the tone of an interaction. The response did not escalate the situation, but it undeniably redirected it. It forced clarity where there might otherwise have been assumption, and in doing so, it exposed how much meaning people attach to seemingly small domestic gestures. As discussions continue, the exchange is increasingly being cited as an example of how language functions as a boundary-setting tool. Rather than waiting to see how the night would unfold, the speaker chose to articulate a condition up front. For supporters, this demonstrated emotional maturity. For critics, it suggested a lack of flexibility. Yet, even those critical of the phrasing conceded that the message itself was clear and impossible to misinterpret. What began as a private question and an equally private answer now stands as a snapshot of contemporary relationship culture. It reflects a moment where individuals are more willing to state what they will not accept, even at the risk of appearing difficult or unromantic. In that sense, the line has become less about where someone sleeps and more about how openly people are willing to negotiate intimacy and respect. As this story continues to circulate, it serves as a reminder that modern communication often blurs the line between the personal and the public. A single exchange, stripped of names and context, can still ignite widespread debate because it taps into shared experiences. Whether viewed as admirable or abrasive, the response has already secured its place as a talking point, proving once again that in today's landscape, even the quietest moments can echo loudly when they touch on something universally understood. As attention shifted from the initial exchange to its deeper implications, the conversation quickly moved beyond the words themselves and into what they represented. Analysts and commentators began to focus on the subtext embedded in both the question and the response. The invitation, "Do you want to stay here tonight?" appeared open-ended, yet many argued it carried an implied uncertainty. In modern relationship dynamics, such phrasing often leaves space for assumptions, placing the responsibility of interpretation on the person being asked rather than on the one extending the offer. The reply, "I'm not sleeping on the sofa," reframed that ambiguity in a single stroke. It did not challenge the invitation directly, nor did it accept it unconditionally. Instead, it exposed a condition that is frequently left unspoken. The sofa, in this context, became more than a piece of furniture. It symbolized a middle ground that satisfies neither emotional closeness nor complete separation. By rejecting that option up front, the speaker effectively demanded clarity about their place and role in the interaction. Relationship experts observing the discussion noted that this kind of response reflects a broader cultural shift toward explicit boundaries. Where previous generations may have tolerated discomfort to maintain peace or avoid awkward conversations, there is now a noticeable move toward directness. The statement was interpreted by many as an attempt to avoid emotional limbo, a state where expectations are unclear and resentment can quietly build. From this perspective, the response was less about comfort and more about self-definition. Critics, however, offered a different interpretation. Some argued that the bluntness of the reply could be read as defensive, potentially shutting down dialogue before it had a chance to develop. They suggested that the response might have assumed an outcome that was never explicitly stated, projecting past experiences onto the present moment. In this view, the refusal was not just a boundary, but also a preemptive strike against disappointment. Despite these differing interpretations, both sides agreed that the exchange highlighted a growing